Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. And in the middle between us is Ron Highland from the 51st District out of Wamego.
Right.
And thank you for being here.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. John, there's a lot going on. Fill us in, jump in wherever you want, because we've got more than we can do in one show.
That is true. You know, it's been 2 weeks since our last, the first week we were out, and we were trying to abide by the governor's stay-at-home order, self-quarantine, which we did. And then last week, of course, it was Good Friday, and we did not have a show. But a number of things have happened in between the last 2 weeks. Of course, today the report is we've got 1,705 affirmed cases of COVID-19
here in Kansas.
Here in Kansas. We have about 375 hospitalizations due to that, and as of this morning, 84 people have passed, and it's attributed to the virus. We've only had one in Dickinson County, not a death, just a confirmed case, and we've had 5 cases in Marion County. So we've got to dodge the bullet here. I think some of the governor's guidelines have been very helpful. We've had some problems in the last 2 weeks. As I'd mentioned, I think the last time we met here, we had House Resolution, Concurrent Resolution 5025, which had to do with giving the governor authority to act in make certain executive orders. It was supposed to have been overseen by the LLC, the Leadership Council. As long as they agreed with her, that was fine. They disagreed with her about the restrictions on religion because she made it criminal penalties that were, if you go to church and they are over the limit, you could actually prosecute people with a Class A misdemeanor, which is punishable by up to a year in jail and or a $2,500 fine. The Attorney General weighed in and sent a letter out to law enforcement and to prosecutors saying, don't enforce this aspect of the executive order because it's probably not constitutional. The LLC did not approve it, the executive order. The governor the next day filed suit against, saying that the LCC did not have authority to override her executive order. And the Supreme Court last Saturday heard the case. I think she filed it on Thursday. The LLC was served the papers on Friday, and on Saturday morning, their attorneys had to actually make arguments. The first time the Kansas Supreme Court heard arguments on a case by the internet. I got up early and watched it on TV, or watched it on my computer. They took each side was given 30 minutes. They argued their case. The Supreme Court had a number of questions of the litigants, the attorneys, and at 11 o'clock that night, they decided with a unanimous verdict that the LLC had no authority to override the governor's executive orders, and they based it just on the text of the resolution, and I, in fact, agree with them because the text was faulty. One justice called it a snafu. One justice indicated, well, you can't override statute with a resolution, and I agree with both those points. It was poorly constructed. Our leadership tells us the reason that it was faulty, and they had looked at it before and thought it may be faulty, but the governor's people were in the conference committee when the Senate and the House agreed to it, and they indicated they were a party to it, which means they were in agreement with them. Well, it turned out they were in agreement as long as you do everything the governor wants. Okay. But when you don't do what the governor wants, we're going to sue you. And so we're going to have to go back in at some point in time, because under the existing statute, the governor can declare an emergency for 15 days. Then it must go to the Finance Council, and they have the authority to extend that for an additional 30 days. So that's 45 days. The problem with the resolution, when they invoked it, they never let the Finance Council get involved. So it had not run its course. It was supposed to go the governor, then the Finance Council, then the LCC. So I would imagine that when we go back in, we'll make some corrections on that. But the governor's kind of proceeding as she finds. She has no checks and balances at this time. So I foresee that coming up in the near future. Another thing that we've had, the LCC lost that lawsuit, but there's been a federal lawsuit filed.
Oh, I want to come to that one in just a minute. We're going to cut away and take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. As you're watching this on your screen, John's would be on your left, your far left, and in between is Ron Highland, representative from the 51st District of Wamego. And John, we were just talking about some of the lawsuits because I heard on the radio this morning about lawsuit filed by two churches, one out of Dodge City and one out of Junction City.
Correct.
What's that about?
Well, it has to do with that social distancing, or the number of people that can gather for a religious service. Many of us think that that's unconstitutional, but these two churches have filed suit in federal court. An attorney by the name of Ryan Kreinhauser is representing them. And in the pleadings, they have alleged that, in fact, on Easter Sunday, they had a law enforcement officer in their church watching them. And the sheriff of Geary County has indicated and told the pastor of the Calvary Baptist Church in Junction City that he would have an officer in there this coming Sunday. My thoughts are, is the sheriff of Geary County, Kansas, needs to listen to the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Kansas, which is the Attorney General, and not necessarily the governor. He is the chief law enforcement officer, and he's told them not to arrest people and not to interfere with religious services. So that's the only thing that really bothers me, is we're going to start having policemen in our churches. Will they not like the sermon and assign a policeman in there and say, well, you're preaching the wrong doctrine? So I think this is, in emergency situations, we give people some authority. The problem has always been you give them too much authority, there's a tendency to abuse it. And Ron, would you agree to that?
No, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it. I mean, in World War II, we locked up Japanese that were born in this country,
Right.
And Germans. So, and in the present state, we don't have the checks and balances. Normally, we have the checks and balances. The legislature oversees the executive branch, the judicial branch oversees the executive branch, and the legislative branch. We all three of them watch each other. In this situation that we've got now, the executive branch has no oversight. And that's dangerous. We need to be looking at reopening our economy. I get calls every day from business owners. And Ron, what's your statistics on state employees and private employees?
Well, we received an email today that the comment was there's 22 million people out of work. They applied for unemployment insurance in the U.S. And then the next line down was how many government employees have applied, and it was 0. We don't know how many it is, but it's a low number. Let's leave it at that. It's not a good situation we're in. And then the government, when they added the $600 to whatever they're receiving by the state, they're making more than they ever did when they were working. And whether they'll go back to work willingly is going to be a question that we'll be faced with here very shortly.
And the legislature needs to be a part of reopening the state. Yeah. We have some good ideas. The governor's not paying attention to us. In fact, Ron and I wrote a letter with a group of other legislators we sent to the governor this week that asked her that we want to know what her plan is. And we have some recommendations we would like for her to listen to. Dwight David Eisenhower, on the invasion on D-Day, did not write that entire plan. He took it from all of our allies, their best brains, so to speak. So you can't do this all by yourself. It's scary to think that she's going to try to do it by herself. And so the legislature needs to be a part of that, because she's going to come to us and ask for specific legislation and or additional funding. She can't get that unless the legislature gives it to her. And by suing us, it's not a good way to start.
Yeah, I understand. Well, Ron, let me ask you this, because as I'm listening this from the outside and reading what there is to read, when you mentioned about the government employees, well, very few are on unemployment, and is that because they're off work, but they're being paid regular salary that they would have been?
Yes. And
so if you're a private individual, if you're a cook in a restaurant or some other private industry of some sort or business, then if your job closes down, you apply for the unemployment. And if you qualify for the unemployment, you also receive how much more a week?
Well, it's $600 is what the federal government is going to kick in.
$600.
So it's $600 plus the $488, which is the top dollar for Kansas unemployment. So that's over $1,000 a week. That's pretty good.
That is
pretty good pay.
And you guys, in each of your situation, John, you cover Abilene, Chapman, lots of other areas in the 70th district, and Ron, you're covering in the 51st district, which is Wamego and an area around that. What are your people in the area telling you, because they're small businesses, and I've got to believe they're probably struggling, and it's nobody's fault here, because this has come upon us,
right?
And like John mentioned at the beginning, here's the number of people that have been infected, and here's the number of people that have lost their life from this. So I mean, this isn't just a flu epidemic that'll pass over the weekend. This is very, very serious, and there isn't a vaccine that you can take. So, but how do you balance this between the people that say, Ron, or John, I'm really hurting here. We can't carry on for much longer. How do you balance this out with that?
Well, you don't want the cure to be worse than the disease. And if we went into a depression, that's exactly what we did. It would last for years. There is a way to do that. I think President Trump's working on a plan, but it's going to take, from all sides. Our first priority, of course, is take care of the health of our citizens. But the health of our citizens also includes their economic health. Would you agree, Don?
Well, no, most of the people I'm hearing from are the self-employed.
Right.
And now the government says they will help those folks as well. But I just heard yesterday when talking to the Department of Labor, those folks have to apply and be denied before they can ever be accepted in the system. Well, the people didn't know that. So this is another wrinkle that's really difficult.
We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. If you're watching it, of course, on television or your screen of any sort, while John's on your far left, in between us is Ron Highland, representative from the 51st District out of Wamego. And Ron, I know that in your earlier life you were a veterinarian, and you've retired from that. And so you have probably more expertise in the medical field here than me or John have. And so what do you see going on? What happens from here? Because for a lot of people, this is really getting kind of scary, and it's just like what John mentioned. Are we going to go broke? Are we going to go back into the economy? If we go back in and we start back up again, where are we going to be with the virus? How do we best handle this? And there's a balance that takes place. And the example John gave was about Dwight Eisenhower coming up with the D-Day invasion plan, and he didn't do it on his own. And so there's kind of a consensus that takes place to bring people together and move forward from there. Where do you see all of this going?
Well, at some point, you have to put your trust in the people. And the people understand what's going on, and they are voluntarily taking care of themselves and distancing. And they're saying, let me open my business, and we'll do it correctly. We'll be safe and all that. And they're saying, no, you can't do that. Well, that's creating a great deal of friction right now. And so we need to get some of the good business people in our state involved, and they can talk to the governor or her people, whatever, and we can come up with a plan that is workable. And it will have to be not only at the county level, but at the community level, because some community levels are not, and counties are not even involved. And they can go back to work. And then we've got the areas in southwest Kansas where we have some of the indigenous folks that are working there, and they're trying to keep them from working. And most likely we shouldn't be doing that. The risk is just not there. During this has made it difficult for us as legislators as well, because we're being asked to have meetings to work on things. Both John and I are assigned to committees that meet throughout the year. I have one next Friday. And because my unique situation, my committee was all electronic. And so anybody could listen in, they could see all the documents we have in our committee, and they could hear what's going on. So they've asked me to be a participant. I've been working with the IT department and the attorneys. The attorneys say we can't do this or you can't do that, and then at some point you just have to say we're going to do this. But they did make a good point. We want whatever we're doing to be secure. And this is all based on the Kansas Open Meetings Act and the Kansas Open Records Act. Two very important laws that we follow very carefully. The fines and so forth for breaking those laws are pretty severe. So, and because we're a government, we have to keep it open to the public. So we're working on that right now. There's a web service that has been approved for government use because it is secure. And the NSA had us out for a meeting out at Forbes Field and explained to us the dangers that are involved with being in government, especially in the legislature. And it was a little frightening. But the one point they did make is there's no such thing as a cloud service that is secure. And so I worked with the IT, and we have developed an internal system now to where people can see the documents, but they never go outside the building, essentially.
Right.
So it's coming, and we will use my meeting next Friday as the test to see how this works out. And then our lives became very difficult because we are trapped at home. We can't go out and talk to the folks. So our phone lines and our emails have just been crazy. And dealing with the unemployment thing is the number one. That's what we probably hear the most of. And then the stay-at-home order, the businesses and then people in general are upset about. But then the third one is the big one, churches and funerals. And people are becoming angrier by the day. And the messages I'm getting, the people are saying their anger is building and it's building. It's not a good situation. On a good news, the Department of Agriculture notified the state yesterday that we have been approved for the commercial hemp production. The bad news is it can't go in effect until the rules and regulations have been passed through the system. And that's where it's hung up right now. So it may be a month, 2 months, even 3 months before that gets through. But we had a bill. John let me run it through his committee, and I was on the floor. I was next up to bring it up.
You were.
To be voted on by the House, and that's when they shut her down. But this was going to fix that so it would be more streamlined and work much better for the rules and regulations. But that's the way it goes.
And if we go back, it'll be a priority to get that passed.
Will the growing season be lost? I know it depends how soon it gets back up to...
We're still under the experimental. That's still approved, so they can go ahead and plant. So anytime during this season, then, they could be off of that into the commercial. So more relaxed regulations, and the big bugaboo was about destruction of a hot field. And the Department of Drug and Enforcement Agency got involved. And they agreed with the state. They said, look, you design how you want it. If you got a hot field and a cold field, mix them instead of having to burn that field or destroy it completely. So
a hot field being over the amount of THC that's allowed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they were good about it, and things are working along pretty well. I was notified by the Department of Agriculture early this morning that they got that approval. So that's good news.
The good thing, Doug, is when you talk about the coronavirus, Ron's a vet, but he also has a PhD in research. He did most of his career in research, so he understands that those microorganisms and stuff, and that's just been real helpful to everybody in the legislature because they can ask him one of those technical questions, and he's probably the only person there that can answer it.
Yeah, well, I understand. I appreciate that.
You work for Bayer, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. All right, we're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be back. You're watching Legislative Updates. Welcome back to our last segment of Legislative Updates with John Barker. He's on far side, and in between is Ron Highland from the 51st District out of Wamego. Do you guys get regular reports coming in from I don't know, I'll just say the state, from various agencies that come to you?
Yeah, different departments send us an update. It's probably very similar to what they put out to the public. I mean, we don't get any confidential hearings from the administration. But yeah, we get some of those updates. You know, we're planned on going back. When we adjourned, we set the date for the 27th of April. The governor has done the stay-at-home order until the 3rd of May.
Right.
So you think we'll go back anytime sooner than that?
Your guess is good as mine.
It is.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, and the leadership doesn't know. I mean, the leadership presently in the governor's office, I don't think are talking. But our sine die, which is the very last day of the legislature, is set in our first resolution, which means the 21st of May. So normally we would be back, and then we would, on that day, we go back in.
Okay.
But that's the official last day.
All right. Appreciate you guys being here. I know you got a lot on your plate right now, and these are difficult times for all, but thank you guys for what you do. We appreciate it. Thanks for watching Legislative Updates. We'll see you next time. Take care.